You are now listening to Talk Loud Radio, sports, nerds, and pop culture.
Watch the deep one for the end zone. Phelan is down there. Oh, he got it! He got it! He got it!
What is going on, guys? All right, welcome to the Armchair Fantasy Show, episode 20, presented by TalkLoudRadio.com. I'm your host, of course, Jeff Lambert. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. Follow the show at Talk Loud Podcast. As always, subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and TuneIn Radio. Stream us in the Going for Two app, and we are also live every Tuesday night on Facebook. If you like the goingfor2.com Facebook page, you can watch us live recording every Tuesday night. Great show tonight, guys. We got opening day of MLB on Thursday, and we're going to have Matt Sandell come on and talk some strategy as well as break down the slate for us, the opening day slate. But before we get to that, I just want to promo real quick. April 8th, it's a Sunday night. We're going to be broadcasting live. It's going to be a special NFL Draft Edition. We're going to have eight guests on that night. They're all assigned a team, and we're going to do a live first round mock draft. Matt is actually going to be part of that podcast as well. He's one of the 8 panel members that are going to be on. So definitely tune into that. Again, April 8th. It'll probably be around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So definitely check that out. All right, Matt, how you doing tonight, man?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm really excited for that podcast coming up here because it's just like the NFL draft, just like the war rooms in there. Several times last year when we did it, I had picks and the guy I wanted was taken, and so I had to scramble looking up what positions teams needed and everything. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm really excited for that podcast.
Definitely, and this will be our biggest panel yet. I think the first year we did it, it was just me, you, and Tim. Of course, that was the infamous Lost podcast. And then we did it a couple years later. We had 3 people on. I think last year we had 5 people on. This will be an 8-panel team, so it'll be interesting for sure. So I'm waiting for that. I can't wait for that.
And, I always got to stroke my ego here. Last year, I had the first 2 picks of the Browns. I had Myles Garrett go number 1. And then, of course, with the 12th pick, could have saved the franchise. But what do I know? I said they should take Deshaun Watson, just sort of, like they did with Manziel, just like to sell some tickets and have a quarterback that the fans would really get behind and change their culture. And I've said it on this podcast before, damn it, I should be the GM of the Browns, man, because their whole franchise would be turned around if they had Deshaun Watson playing Q for them.
Yeah, definitely. You made a great call on that because, shoot, if he was there, they would have been a much better team, most likely. But yeah, good call on that. Unfortunately, the Browns, as they always do, tend to mess things up. So, but yeah, definitely looking forward.
With that 12th pick, Deshaun Watson was actually taken by Houston at that pick. So I got the pick right, actually.
Just the wrong team. That's true. And before we get into the MLB, I want you to get your couple of one-hitters on the NBA right now. What do you think of this winding down and all this resting and the Warriors being so injured right now? You think they're in trouble for the playoffs?
So I got a little conspiracy theory that I believe. I don't know if a lot of people I haven't heard anybody talk about it, but so Steve Kerr has always said that he really wants to rest his players, and he was talking about before the All-Star break. He said our team's just struggling just to get to the All-Star break. We need that 5-6 day break just to recoup, and just the season is so long. 82 games is a long season, and so my theory, and a little bit got debunked a little bit here with the injury news that Steph Curry won't be playing in the first round of the playoffs. But prior to that news, I had said that I believed that the Steph Curry injury was fake. I didn't think he actually really got hurt, and that they were just trying to basically save him for the regular season. Then, he makes some miraculous comeback in round 1 of the playoffs, and so they could just rest Steph Curry for like 3 weeks. I honestly believe that, and but apparently he's supposedly out for round 1. But you never know; he might. He's been really recovering really fast from this injury, so I'm not totally sure that wasn't just like a full inside conspiracy theory to get Steph ready for the playoffs.
It's definitely possible. I mean, that whole big four has been out for a few games now. Draymond Green missed another game tonight. Klay Thompson's been out. KD is supposed to return on Thursday, I believe. But yeah, I think if they go into the playoffs and they're actually injured the way they say they are, they could be in trouble if they meet Houston in the playoffs at any point.
Well, the thing is, Jeff, is that Houston has the 1 seed locked up. They're 5.5 games in front of the Warriors, which is incredible. The Warriors have no incentive to play their starters right now. They have the rest of the games on their schedule. They have 7 games left. They're not going to catch the Rockets, so who cares? Why would you even play your starters at all?
True story.
There's no incentive. There's no incentive for the Warriors. Who cares if they even drop down to the 3rd seed? It doesn't really matter. They're gonna get an easy matchup in round 1, and they're probably going to be playing in the finals again. These last 7 games for some teams just do not matter. Houston, again, they don't care. They can rest all their guys too.
True story, and they rested tonight. Both James Harden and Capella were out tonight, I believe.
Yep.
All right, you ready to talk some baseball?
Yeah, absolutely. One quick thing I wanted to talk about, just since we're on the topic of NBA. One of the weirdest stories we've heard in recent years, and I know you're probably you're sort of by the Philadelphia area, but this whole deal with Markelle Fultz, the first overall pick in last year's draft, so much hype coming out, and then it's just one of the weirdest stories. Like he didn't play the last 70 games here, and came back in a surprise return yesterday. Had a really good outing. But he wasn't injured at all, Jeff. He wasn't injured whatsoever. A lot of people are saying he just lost confidence. He didn't want to play. He was just sort of the mental toughness is really, it's weird. It's just one of the weirdest stories we've had in the NBA this year. The first overall pick was never injured throughout the season. Somebody said he got fluid drained from his elbow. That wasn't true. And Bill Simmons talked on his podcast that he thinks that Fultz just has the yips, man. He just is just really scared, and he's an 18-year-old kid going to the NBA. A lot of pressure on him from Philadelphia. The fans they want to get a good team into the playoffs. They've been so bad for so long, and he thinks that Fultz just didn't have a real injury, just mentally was not ready for the NBA. So just a really weird story. He wasn't injured at all in the last 70 games, just basically sat out.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, and there's a whole story about his shot being, his shot changing and having the hitch in his shot and the whole 9. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting story.
We've talked about on the podcast before that Vine that was going around of him when the few games that he did play in the season. His first few games, he took a free throw, and it was literally just a straight. It hit right off the backboard and to the left. It wasn't anywhere close. If you haven't seen that video, check it out. Markelle Fultz terrible free throw. It's astounding. It looked like one of the fans at halftime. It was just so bad.
One of those contests.
Exactly. That's exactly what it looked like. And so I don't know what's going on there. He was 5 for 13. He was okay yesterday. He got a lot of assists and some rebounds. So just a weird story. But if he can actually be something good and really not be a bust with that first overall pick, because they missed out on a lot of guys. Lonzo Ball, Donovan Mitchell, Dennis Smith Jr. If he's not good, that's bad for that franchise.
Definitely.
They wasted their first overall pick.
Definitely. All right, man. Baseball on Thursday. You excited?
I know you're not. You're not a big baseball guy. It's sort of your off season right now. I'm sure. Do you still play DFS though, and take your writer's advice and stuff like that?
I do actually, and I still kind of use the strategy I've been using for the last couple years. One of my writers wrote an article, probably almost 3 years ago now, about a cash game strategy. It only works on short slates, so 2 or 3 game slates. Basically, you get a pitcher that's heavily favored That's the pitcher you take, hoping that he's highly owned. Basically, eliminate the pitcher altogether, and then you pick pretty much hitters that are in the top, 5. You pick some of the games that are going to be the high scoring game, and stack their hitters. You typically punt one position. I mean, like minimum salary guy that's in the lineup, usually a catcher or an outfielder. You just completely punt him, and then you just build your lineup from there. And it's worked out really well because you get that pitcher that's the highest on the slate. It doesn't matter what they do. It pretty much guarantees you to eliminate that pitcher because everyone's going to own him anyway. And then the hitters, if you can stack as many hitters from one team on a high scoring game, you get a couple of good hits here and there. On a short slate for a cash game, you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, I like it. I like the theory. I know what article you're talking about. I've used it a couple of times before. It's pretty successful. Definitely.
All right, man. Well, let's talk some strategy first. Then we'll take a commercial break and we'll come back and we'll break the slate down. But let's start where everyone's lineup starts off with the pitchers. I want to talk about the two pitcher format that we've got on DraftKings and how it differs and what the advantage disadvantages of two pitchers versus one pitcher on FanDuel.
Yeah, 100%. For me, I like DraftKings for baseball. FanDuel baseball, and this is the meat and potatoes of why I don't like it, is that one pitcher, I just don't. If that one pitcher, I've had this happen too many times when I played on FanDuel. If that one pitcher struggles, so let's say we look at Thursday's slate. There's several very good pitchers on the slate: Chris Sale, Max Scherzer, Luis Severino of the Yankees, and they're all priced basically the same. It's basically you're going to have one of those high-priced pitchers. It just depends which one fits your flavor, And so I personally, we're going to talk about it later, but I'm going Chris Sale for the slate on DraftKings. But if you have Chris Sale and he just flops with that one pitcher in your line, your night's over. Your night is over before it began, just because, if he struggles and then Scherzer does fine or average or above average, you're missing out on 45 points right there.
Definitely.
Which is so hard to come back with on FanDuel. It's just too hard. And so the two pitcher strategy I like because another reason is sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes the high end pitchers don't work out or just have a bad outing. Maybe they're playing in Coors Field or against a good Indians team. And sometimes I like mid-tier guys, but you can't really play a mid-tier or low-priced pitcher on FanDuel because, if that low guy struggles or if he's not the sleeper you thought he was, again, your night's over if everybody's going on Scherzer and Chris Sale and Clayton Kershaw. But on DK, you can have Chris Sale, Kershaw, and then with your second spot, have a lower-end pitcher, mid-tier guy, and then boost your lineup. So I really like that. The more and more I talk about it, the more and more FanDuel just sucks for baseball. It really does. I don't recommend playing it. Just the two-pitcher strategy and the pricing is really soft on FanDuel. You can fit a lot of good guys. And the thing about FanDuel with pitching is that everybody needs a good pitcher to start. That's the lock, just the anchor of your lineup. And so everybody has Chris Sale, Clayton Kershaw in their lineup. So there's less variability, and it's not as much a game of skill. You know what I'm saying? Like if everybody has Kershaw, like you said, it eliminates the pitcher position.
This is true, definitely. What kind of metrics do you look at when you pick your pitcher? Are you just looking at favorites, like Vegas favorites? You looking at strikeout percentages? What are we looking at to pick our pitchers usually?
For me, I usually you gotta, of course, on either site, you gotta pay up for one of the top 2 or 3 highest priced guys. And so usually those will be one of my locks. You just got to fit them in. It's a game theory problem. And usually it doesn't work out if you don't have one of those guys getting you the 25. But another thing I look at for the second pitcher is we talk about in football, Big Ben, Drew Brees. Those guys really suck on the road historically. They just, for some reason, something's off and they just don't like playing on the road. Pitchers are like that too. I look at road and away ERAs, strikeouts per 9. Both of those stats, home and away. If there's a big difference, if a guy like Clayton Richard who's actually on the slate on Thursday. He's got a weird home and away. Like his home is like a 4.5 ERA, something like that. Or it might be like 3.8, something like that. But his away ERA is like 5, 6. If there's a big discrepancy there, that's not just a random thing. Like something about them, whether it's a mental thing or just they just don't like pitching on the road with the fans not behind them. They're on the road, like the other team's fans are booing them and stuff like that. Like that's what you got to look at. And so if there's a big discrepancy in road and away ERA, I usually fade guys who have a terrible road ERA because, it's very telling of the slate too. So that's another thing I look at. And also strikeouts per 9, another big tell there. That's where the majority of your points come from. And it's something that I don't really like. I feel like MLB Daily Fantasy is sort of flawed in that strikeouts. There's a lot. Basically, your whole pitching is how many strikeouts did my pitcher get? And that's not what real baseball is.
This is true.
Real baseball, if the game of baseball was played the way a manager wanted it to and how a, quote, fantasy manager wanted it to, there would be a no-hitter, 27 pitches. Just everybody gets one pitch and they pop out. Strikeouts, they take a toll, and, I mean, it really ups the pitcher's pitch count and everything. What we're looking for is out. It doesn't really have to come through a strikeout. If you can just get out, get fly balls, ground balls, that's what we're looking at. I feel there's too much value and point tied into strikeouts, but, that's how the game is played. So you got to look at strikeouts per 9 when picking your pitcher. Definitely.
So speaking about the home and away thing, I want to kind of touch on a little bit on the factor of the ballpark as far as locality. You mentioned Coors Field. Everyone knows Coors Field is a hitter's park. But how important is it for pitchers if it's not Coors Field, if it's in a cold weather city, if it's in a dome, if it's in a warm weather city? Like how important is this to the pitchers?
Well, I think it's pretty important for the start of the season. Once we get into June, July, and August, everybody's weather is basically at least 80 degrees. Heck, even here where I'm from in Minnesota, it gets to 90 in the summer. So that I don't worry about as much. But, I honestly don't take the park factor into account really when picking my pitcher. Obviously, you'd like your pitcher to be at home, a familiar ballpark, something that they know. And of course, Coors Field is just the worst thing about MLB Daily Fantasy. I hate it. It's just. I don't know why they don't have a dome stadium. It legitimately just throws the whole slate off. I don't know what to do with it most times. I mean, DraftKings has made it so like sometimes those guys are up there the hitters are up there around $5,800, $6,000 because they know everybody wants those guys in their lineup. They're hitting in Coors, and it's proven that just the runs come in Coors Field. But other than that, I honestly don't look too much into it. It could be the deciding factor of if I'm on the fence about a guy, and then let's say he's playing in Milwaukee, which is a big hitter's park, or it may sway me the other way if he's on the road at Petco Park in San Diego, big pitcher's park. That sometimes pushes me over the edge to say, okay, this is a good play. But I don't really look at it. It honestly is all about what team they're facing. How good is that team's offense? Do they have good righty versus lefty split, stuff like that? I don't take ballpark factor too much into selecting my pitcher.
Gotcha. So it's not really something you look at to begin with, but if you're deciding between, just looking at the slate here, like Chris Sale and Matt Scherzer, the park might be the deciding factor between the two of them, right? Kind of splitting hairs a little bit.
Yeah, but like for the slate, just as an example, like Chris Sale's taking on the Rays, and the Rays have a terrible offense, and so I'm going with Chris Sale. The Scherzer's taking on the Cincinnati Reds, who I think have a really good offense. They had one of the better offenses, and they hit a lot of home run balls, and I believe that game is on the road in a hitters-friendly park. So that's just right there. The fact that they're playing the Reds and it's in a hitters-friendly park, I'm not playing Max Scherzer because of that reason.
All right, and the last thing I want to talk about with pitchers is it sort of goes for the entire, pitchers and hitters. The one thing in other sports we don't have to worry about really is weather. Of course, in baseball, the most important thing you got to worry about sometimes is weather, because you got to make sure your game's actually being played. Um, how do you go about, approaching building a lineup when you know weather could be an issue? Do you sort of hedge your bets, expecting the game to be played? Because, of course, once the game starts, I don't know if DraftKings has late swap or not. I don't play much on DraftKings, but I know FanDuel does not. So if a game gets rained out on a late slate and you've got some of the early guys playing, you're basically screwed when that game gets canceled. So how do you go about handling weather?
On DK, I believe they still, the last time that I played it, if that game starts and you have a guy in that line, the game is canceled. He gets 0 points, basically. That's the same with FanDuel, of course. And I actually, to be honest with you, I like that. I honestly like that as if you didn't do your research, if you didn't look and see that this game had weather in it, you deserve a 0 for those guys. That's just my opinion. What I do when it comes to MLB, if you play every day like I do and you do, you gotta follow Kevin Roth on Twitter. He's the RotoWire weather guy for MLB. He has an awesome system where it's green to red, just like a stoplight. Green means that game's ready to go, no worries. Red, stay away, fade that game. I really love the system. I've followed him for years, and he's excellent. He gets his article right 3 hours before he tweets out a bunch of stuff. So yeah, follow Kevin Roth on Twitter. That's how I basically. I haven't had too much. I've had NBA players get announced that they're injured, or not injured, that they're that they are injured and not going to be playing an hour after lock, but I've never really dealt with anything weather-wise because I followed Roth on Twitter. And when it comes to my lineup, it's not something I really worry about because, I know exactly which games are going to be played and which ones aren't because of Kevin Roth, quite honestly. And it doesn't sway my decision, really.
Definitely. There is one sort of strategy I wanted to point out that I've used in the past, and not everyone knows this. Because I play on a lot of short slates, I play a lot of the West Coast games usually because they're later. On 2-game slates, if one of the games gets canceled, the entire contest gets canceled. So what I've done in the past is if I know that there's a game that might be canceled and it's a good, high-scoring game, I will stack all the hitters from that game because if it gets canceled, I have nothing happens. I get my money back. If everyone else is sort of hedging their bets playing the other game, I'll get low-owned hitters from the game that, had the quote-unquote rain delay or whatever. So it works out perfect a lot of times.
Absolutely, yeah. Whether every DFS sport, NFL, everything has their little annoying quirk. NFL has injuries and players who, literally the way the sport is played, it's a violent sport. Players get injured in the first quarter. Your day's over if you had a high-priced wide receiver, something like that. And NBA, of course, has oh, man, it's been a headache this year, Jeff.
Yes,
I know you know that. It's been an absolute headache. The NBA needs to figure something out where these guys are getting released right after lock. The NBA legitimately makes so much money from people buying League Pass and watching games because of daily fantasy. They need to address this problem that players just should not be able to. I don't know how you'd enforce it or anything. It'd be weird logistic-wise, but players should not be able to be released after lock. Oh, Tyreek Evans is out. Sorry, everybody. 50% of the people who played him and are going to lose money now. Like, that's just not fair.
Agreed.
And then, of course, MLB's weird quirk is the weather that literally games can be canceled. And if that happens, you're screwed. That's
You're
0
SOL.
points if you stack that game. So it sucks, but just stay up to date. Kevin Roth, follow him on Twitter. You'll be fine.
All right, definitely. All right, let's move on to some of the hitters. Sorry, I'm reading my notes here. So paying up for hitters obviously is, in daily fantasy, it's not the same as paying up in NFL or NBA where you have a guy that's going to get you points. He's going to get the ball. In football, you get a high price running back. He's going to get you something. Or you got the high price, Russell Westbrook or James Harden. They're not going to go out and put up 0 points pretty much ever. But in baseball, it's a little bit different. You can have the top, hitter on the slate, and he can just go out and go 0 for 4, 0 for 5 and get you 0 points. How do you approach that in daily fantasy to sort of avoid or sort of hedge your bets a little bit on avoiding some of those guys that are high-priced guys that could go out and, put up 0 points?
Well, in NBA, you know, it's very different. Like there's different ways to win, and it honestly just depends on the slate. You could have a lineup in NBA of LeBron, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Paul George, and then the rest are literally $4,000, $3,000 players. And of course, in MLB, you can do the same thing. But it doesn't work out as well in MLB, of course, because, you know, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Giannis Cespedes, all in the same lineup, that could legitimately be 0 points. And so in MLB, I try and have a balanced lineup. I never do the high-priced Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, all those guys paired with a bunch of guys hitting ninth in the lineup. I never, ever do that. I really try and balance out and have everybody around, if we're talking DK, everybody be around $3,800 to $4,200. I really rarely ever pay up for the Mike Trouts and Bryce Harpers of the world. It just never works out for me. I mean, I just pick them on bad nights. But of course, it just depends if you're playing cash or GPP. But
right.
I just really, again, that makes baseball so frustrating. I've seen too many people post about how annoying that is, that they stacked with a bunch of big hitters, and then their pitchers were really were really bad, and it just didn't work out, and they made no money that day because about a third of the time Bryce Harper will go 0 for 3.
Yep, exactly. All right, so speaking of Bryce Harper and sort of the home run ball, you know, obviously that's the single biggest category as far as scoring points for hitters. And now in this situation, you know, you got the ballpark, you got the different weather that we had talked about. There's all kind of home run predictors out there. How much do you look at the home run ball, you know, in a guy's game, you know, if he's a big home run hitter when you're picking your guys, or do you want guys that you can just get on base and score points that way?
In cash, it's honestly just GPP versus cash. Like I said earlier, cash games, you got to get those guys. It doesn't matter if they only hit 20 home runs a year, 15 home runs a year. You got to have at least some points, 5 points, a double, a stolen base, a walk, anything. You just need points in cash games just to get to that 50% mark. In GPP, however, that's where you are literally trying to guess who hits a home run, honestly, or who steals a lot of bases someday. That's basically GPP versus cash. My cash games, I usually try and get like 1 or 2 big home run hitters in there, just in case they do hit a home run or have a couple dongs that day. But normally my lineup is very balanced with guys hitting at the top of the order, guys who can steal bases, get walks, anything like that to get points in cash games. That's what I'm looking for. GPP, I'm going the other way, just stacking guys who have good home run matchups, try and win a lot of money that way. That's honestly how it goes. Gotcha.
I wanted to mention something real quick to all the listeners out there, and this may hurt your heart a little bit, Matt. You know, I'm going to bring up some bad memories here. Matt actually was writing for us for quite a while at goingfor2.com. He'd do a cash game lineup, and he would post a lineup at the bottom of his article every night. And then he would play that lineup in a cash game, usually put like $1 on it just so he can kind of see how his lineup did. So one morning I wake up and I got about 20 to 30 to 40 DMs from different readers thanking me for this lineup that, of course, Matt put in his article. I was getting pictures of guys that won $7,000, $8,000, $10,000. So I text Matt, like, Matt, that lineup must have been really good last night. How much did you win? He won $1.80.
I won like $4. I won like $4. I will never forget that. That was my worst. I
tell that story all the time, man. You're famous. I tell you what. Every time I've been on a podcast about anything, I tell that story.
Oh my God, Jeff. That's the worst. That's the worst gambling. I didn't even lose any money. I made money, but it's still. Again, oh man, I know the exact night you're talking about. I was getting messages on Facebook saying $2 would have turned into $6,000 with the lineup you posted.
Yep.
$25. Who knows what $25 would have made? And yeah, I don't know. I still don't play GPP or tournaments just because I think it's so hard to cash in tournaments. Like even if I've gotten like, you need about the top 20% to cash, min cash in a tournament. And if I get 25%, you're out of the money, and that sucks. And you had a really good lineup too. Definitely. So I don't play a lot of tournaments. And yet that story forever haunts me. That could have been a nice little payday for me.
That was definitely, that was your big night.
Yeah, I'm a man of the people. I'm Robin Hood. I'm trying to help the people make money,
All right, I just wanted to kind of get that in there because, like I said, every podcast I've ever been on, I tell that story about how you wrote, you did this lineup and you wrote an article and all the readers won money, but you won like $1.80 or whatever it was.
Oh, brutal. Well, I'm happy that they could cash. Nobody hit my PayPal thanking me or anything like
exactly,
that.
Exactly. They won
whatever.
Yeah, it's all good. All right, let's look at some of the metrics when picking your hitter. There's a ton of like abbreviations and things that I don't completely understand. What kind of things do you look at when you're picking your hitter?
Usually when I start breaking down a slate, what I do is I first look at BVP, and that's a pretty popular one in the DFS community. Batter versus pitcher historical stats. How has Mike Trout done against pitcher X or whatever, the only way I do it, RotoWire has a cool tool that shows you on the day's slate what pitchers are facing what hitters and who's had success against which pitchers and hitters on the slate. And they give cold matchups, like when a hitter's like 0 for 25 against a pitcher or 1 for 14, something like that. And then it shows, of course, 5 for 10 guys who have had really good success against the pitcher they're facing. And I honestly start there when making my cash lineup. What I do is I only look at, like, if a guy's 4 for 10 against a pitcher, that doesn't really tell me anything. Anybody can go 5 for 10 or 6 for 10. Yes, they've owned that pitcher for basically, but like, it's such a small sample size that it doesn't give us a lot to go off. You could easily go 0 for 3 tonight. But if a guy like Joe Mauer, for example, his BVP against Gavin Floyd, who is no longer in the league, but his BVP against him was like, I think he was like 25 for 45 or something off him lifetime. That means he's probably going to get a couple hits or a couple walks. They don't want to face them in that game because he's had so much success just because he's had a lot of at-bats. But if it's like 10 at-bats or under, I don't even pay attention to it. It's just a random at that point. But if there's like 25, 30, 40 at-bats against the pitcher, that's a pretty good sign of how they're going to do, especially in cash games. But in GPP, I wouldn't really worry about BVP. But that's always a good place to start, is looking at, hey, has Mike Trout really dominated this one pitcher? And that's just where I start, basically.
Gotcha.
Another thing I look at is for hitters is WOBA, and that's some statistic that some nerd made up. Relatively,
I've heard that one. I don't know what it actually means, so hopefully you can explain it to me.
It means with on base average. It's basically a nice little tool just to throw in all sorts of factors. I don't know how it works, but I know that I can even use it to make money. It just takes in so many factors: doubles, triples, home runs, everything. I honestly don't know how it works, but it takes all those into account and literally is basically saying how good of a hitter is this guy in terms of extra base hits, got runners on, everything like that. So that's something that I pay attention to a lot too. And the last one that I really look at is for cash games. Just simple, really simple, on base percentage. How often does this guy get on base? Home versus away, righty versus lefty. Just what's he doing when he's up at the plate? I don't care about walks, because on FanDuel, a walk is literally as good as a hit, like they always say, that old phrase. It's worth 3 points for a single. It's worth 3 points for a walk. So I use that a lot on FanDuel. DraftKings, I look more at WOBA, but those are just some of the metrics I use. Or again, this also has to be taken into account, the hot hand fallacy. If a guy is really on fire, it really kind of messes up the slate, because a lot of guys, if somebody's on fire for the last few days, they'll notice that, and everybody will have him in their lineup.
Right.
And if you fade on the right day, he could easily just go cold and go 0 for 4. And that's something that I look at too, is just how have they done over the past couple of weeks too.
Gotcha. All right, you had mentioned righty versus lefty. Can you explain? I mean, every year I have to remind myself on how to remember which is good and which is bad. Righty versus lefty, righty versus righty. Which ones are the good combinations for hitters, and which ones is the bad combinations for hitters?
That's a great question, and it honestly really, really drives how I look at lineups, because it's really important. Write this down, get it tattooed on yourself, Jeff. Whatever you need to do to remember. Lefties specifically, for some reason, I'm not sure really what it is. You'd think they'd be symmetrical, right versus left, but lefty batters really, really struggle for the most part against lefty pitchers. The way that the ball comes out of the pitcher's hand, the angle is extremely strange, and curveballs and sliders come out at a different angle for the batter's eye. And so you look at a ton of just check it out, Google stats of lefty hitters, and normally their average is going to be significantly worse against a lefty pitcher, just for the reason the way the ball comes out of their hand, something messes up with it. Also, so of course, righty versus lefty, those are the matchups you want to target for the most part. Or again, a right-handed pitcher throwing to a left-handed batter. Those are the matchups that we want to look for when making our lineups. Again, it's just the way the ball comes out of the pitcher's hand that makes it a lot easier to pick up on for a right-handed hitter facing a lefty pitcher. And so that's a big thing that I take into account when making my lines. Is a lot of the hitters on the Diamondbacks, I made so much money off the Diamondbacks last year because all of their hitters, they had a predominantly right-handed lineup. And so when a lefty pitcher came in, they would just absolutely dominate that. And it's going to happen this year again, especially with the Diamondbacks. It's how it works. So if there's a lot of righties in the middle of the lineup, middle of the order against a lefty pitcher, or a lot of lefties, like my Minnesota Twins have a lot of lefties in their lineup who are good hitters. So if a righty comes into town, I know that the Twins are very good at hitting righties because they have so many left-handed bats in their lineup.
Gotcha. Yeah, every year that I'm playing baseball, I got to remember that, to look at that, and I always forget what the good combination is and what the bad combination is. But thanks for that clarification. Last thing
yeah.
Go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Get it tattooed on yourself.
Yeah.
You gotta get it. You gotta get it in ink to remind yourself. But it's honestly probably like the second biggest factor I look at is righty versus lefty matchups. And when doing your research, I use MLB.com/stats to sort of, you can filter things out and everything. The hitters, the discrepancy of righty versus lefty for some hitters is insane. I'll give you an example, like Eric Thames of the Milwaukee Brewers. His average, he's a lefty batter. His average against lefties is like 185. His average against righties is like 330. So there's obviously something going on there that you can take advantage of. It's pretty simple. DFSers have been using it for years. I'm not breaking any barriers down or giving any secrets out, but just, yeah, that's a huge thing when making my lineups, is to look at righty-lefty matchups. Definitely.
All right, the last thing I got for hitters really is explain the importance of batting on the top of the order. You got your 1 through 5, 1 through 4 hitters. What's the importance of that? Tell some of the new people out there that haven't played MLB yet. What's the importance of that?
Well, it's interesting. I'm kind of a grandfather when it comes to daily fantasy. I've been playing for about 4 years now, 3 or 4 years now. And I first saw like a Twitter ad for daily fantasy on a site called Draft Street. I'm not sure if you got in on that or if you've always been on FanDuel. But Draft Street was acquired by DraftKings after about 5 months into me playing. And I started during the NBA playoffs and MLB season. And I kind of liked this because I think it gives a lot more strategy and creativity. Is that the way Draft Street did their scoring, if your player got an out, that was negative points for you. So the thing about hitters hitting at the top of the lineup is they, get more at bats and more opportunities to get points. And in DraftKings, you don't lose points just if your hitter goes 0 for 7 versus 0 for 4. So I kind of like Draft Street because I think just because, like, everybody takes a low-priced guy who just happens to be bumped up to 1 in the order, and it kind of sucks. It really does, because he gets 5 or 6 at bats, usually 1 or 2 more at bats than he normally would, and that's more opportunity to get on base. And another thing is, of course, it just makes sense to have your better hitters hitting in the top of the order, 3, 4, 5 guys versus your 7, 8, 9 hitters are your worst hitters. And so guys who are bumped up in the lineup are getting on base. They're going to be on base for your Mike Trouts, your Bryce Harpers, your Nolan Arenados of the world, so they can easily, if a home run happens and they're on base, there's points for you, And so, they get more opportunities to score at the top of the lineup. But I honestly wish that DraftKings and FanDuel would give negative points for outs, because I just think it makes it so much more of a strategy game and more creativity happens that way.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk a little bit about stacking. I know stacking is a big word in DFS. In football, you stack your quarterback and your receiver. Basketball, you may stack your point guard and one of the guys on his team that he assists a lot to. But in baseball, it's to a different degree, a different level. You can sometimes stack 3, sometimes 4 guys if you can fit them all into your lineup. Kind of go over the importance of stacking a lineup.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, in football, it's like the opposite. You don't want to have your running back and your wide receiver tight end on the same team, because they're going to vulture touchdowns and yards from each other, right? And so in MLB, it's the exact opposite. And NHL does this a lot too. When you look at a slate, check out Thursday. It's going to happen. It happens 5 or 6 times a week. When you look at all the box scores of MLB games, it's going to be the scores are going to be 4-2, 1-4, 3-0, 5-2, and then one game just explodes, and 1 or 2, and it's going to be 10-2 is going to be the final score, or 8-4, something like that. And the rest of the games are pretty close to around every team. Both teams score about 2 or 3 runs. But then there's that 1 or 2 games on every slate that just explodes. And so that's the one that you want to target. And Vegas, of course, tries to look at those over-unders win. And that's a big way that you could take advantage, is looking at Coors Field's over-under is always around 11 runs. They assume that game's going to be something like a 6-5 game, 7-8 game, something like that. So stacking in MLB is very important because, one, sometimes a pitcher just doesn't have it and just gets rocked throughout the evening and gives up 5 to 6 runs. And of course, runs equals points, and they give up the long ball. And then if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hitters in a lineup against a pitcher who struggles that night, the leadoff hitter gets on, steals a couple bases, the second guy in the lineup gets a hit, and then the third guy cranks a home run. You got RBIs, home runs, runs scored, everything. It's just it's a slew and bonanza of points all at once. So that's why stacking is important. Again, I'm not breaking any barriers down, not giving any secrets out. Stacking is extremely common. I do it even in my cash lineups. I try and do 2 games that I think are going to explode. I like to usually have 2 to 3 players from each team that I think is going to score a lot of runs. And so out of all the 8 guys in my lineup, a lot of them are going to be playing on the same team, even in a cash game. So, yeah, basically one pitcher, 2 pitchers are going to have a bad night every night, and just take advantage and get all the runs you can from the hitters facing that pitcher.
Definitely. Yeah, my writer that wrote that article, he kind of pointed out how you're right. If you have the 2, 3, and the 4, and the 2 and the 3 get on base, and the 4 knocks them both in, you get all those points, which is a pretty hefty sum when they all if they all get in. So yeah, it's definitely a strategy for sure that you definitely have to exploit in MLB, which is not quite the same in other sports, but definitely. All right, we'll take a quick commercial break here, Matt, and then when we come back, we'll actually break down opening day slate. You ready to do that?
Sounds good, my friend.
Do you need advice for your fantasy football team? How about your DraftKings or FanDuel lineup? GoingFor2.com has you covered. GoingFor2.com has exclusive content from some of the best fantasy writers in the industry, whose credentials include Bleacher Report, Fantasy Pros, and Fantasy Life. From advice columns to player ranks, GoingFor2.com has it all. Sign up for our newsletter to have all of our content sent to your inbox. Start winning today. Visit goingfor2.com because no one remembers the extra point.
Today's show is brought to you by Daily Fantasy Nerd. They have everything you need to build better lineups. You can analyze stats, view up-to-the-minute Vegas lines, check player game logs, import and manage your own projections, build optimal lineups, and a bankroll tracker. To get started for free, visit goingfor2.com/dailyfantasynerd. That's goingfor2.com/dailyfantasynerd. Start winning today.
Army with harmony.
All right, welcome back. We are here with Matt Sandell of goingfor2.com, frequent guest to the podcast here, and we're going to be breaking down the opening day slate of MLB. Matt, let's go ahead and just kick this off with the pitchers. You kind of mentioned earlier that you were looking at Chris Sale as your top pitcher. Is there anybody else that you're going to kind of hedge your bets with and play as well, or is Chris Sale pretty much locked in, ready to roll?
When it's opening day, it's tough to. A lot of people would love to fit Max Scherzer, who's the other $12,000 pitcher on DK, and Sale, and that's almost always a guaranteed at least 50 points for you right there. And then if you can find some lower tier, lower priced guys who are maybe batting higher in the lineup or in good spots, just really cheap guys, that can really work. But opening day is tough because everybody really knows basically what the lineup is already, and so the pricing is not. It's just not it's not as hard. It's very, very soft pricing, and so there aren't going to be a lot of $2,600 players batting seventh or anything like that. So it really looks like this slate. It's kind of tricky actually. This slate, I'm going to have Chris Sale as my bell cow in all my lineups. He's 12,200. So he'll be my main guy. And then it's really, really hard to fit a lot of bats in if you go Scherzer in that other spot. And I think Scherzer might actually struggle against the Reds. I think the Reds, you heard it here first on this podcast, the Reds offense, you're going to need to stack them all the time starting off the year. They're going to be high priced. This team, I believe in this team. They have so many good bats. They're going to be a surprise team to a lot of fans out there. The Reds have an awesome, awesome offense, and a lot of people just don't think of the Reds as a good team. They haven't been relevant in a long time, but their offense is fantastic. I'm going to be stacking the Reds a lot, but they have a tough Nationals pitching staff to work in this first slate. But after that, Cincinnati, stack them all the time. They have a great offense. But my other two pitchers that I'm looking at on the slate would be Aaron Nola for 9,400. He's playing on the road, and he's a lot better at home than the road, but his discrepancy of home and road ERA isn't that bad. It's not like his ERA at home is 2 and his road ERA is 5 or 6. So I think Aaron Nola is playing a Braves team who isn't very good. They're trying to get their prospects up, but their offense is just still, besides Freddie Freeman, is not very good. So Aaron Nola for 9,400 is some good salary relief there. Also, Chase Anderson of the Milwaukee Brewers, opening day starter. He had an excellent year last year, 2.74 ERA. Chase Anderson taking on the Padres, who had the worst offense in the league last year. He's going on the road to San Diego, Pitchers Park. I really like that play too. The Padres just really, really struggled last year, and he's only 8,100. I really like those two guys, Nola and Chase Anderson. I really, really do not think you're going to be able to put Scherzer and Sale in your DK lineup tomorrow. It's just not in the cards. Maybe in a different slate, but it's opening day, and so you're going to have to need some mid-tier pitchers here. And I like Chase Anderson and Aaron Nola a lot tomorrow.
Fair enough. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the catcher here. Who you got as your top plays for catcher?
Catcher's a really interesting position because a lot of catchers get the night off very frequently. and DraftKings doesn't have a pricing tool for that. So a lot of catchers, you don't know that they're going to be out until 2 hours before lock. So you can get a very cheap catcher who's getting in the lineup to get the catcher the day off, because those knees, man, playing catcher, those knees, it really takes a toll on you if you're playing every day for 9 innings on your knees there. So catchers, a couple that I like tomorrow. I'm curious to see who the catcher is for the Brewers, but I really like a Brewers stack tomorrow. Those will definitely come up. Manny Pina or Stephen Vogt are the two catchers to look at there. Matt Wieters of the Nationals is another one to look at. Matt Wieters, they have a good matchup against Homer Bailey. He's like $3,200, very cheap. He didn't have a great year last year, but overall in his career, he's been a very good hitter. So Matt Wieters is another one, or whoever's catching for the Brewers. I'd throw the catcher for Milwaukee into a stack there for sure.
All right. And that kind of brought up an interesting difference between NBA and NFL and a few others. For people that haven't played MLB before, kind of coming over, being new to this, is the lineups. I mean, they change every time they play the game. So, you might have a guy it's not like where, the Rockets, you got the same starting five every night. In baseball, you never know who's going to be put into the lineup. You can have a guy that hasn't played in a few games come into the lineup and, hit. Kind of explain that dynamic in MLB and how that works.
Well, yeah, it all goes hand in hand with righty versus lefty matchups. Managers know that left-handed hitters hit better against righties and right-handers hit better against lefties. So a lot of teams' righty versus lefty lineups, depending on which hand the pitcher is throwing out of that game, literally determines the lineup. So, for instance, my Minnesota Twins, Max Kepler is a left-handed batter. He is just so bad against left-handed pitchers. His batting average is like 150 against them, something like that. So every time that a left-handed pitcher goes on the mound, Max Kepler is out of the lineup. And so, again, that's with all other teams, all managers do that. So that's a big thing to look at, is the lineups will change every single day depending on who's on the hill. Some guys who are struggling will get moved back in the lineup. Some guys who are low in the lineup doing really well, they want to get more at-bats for them, they'll be up higher in the lineup.
Definitely. That's one thing that I had to learn when I started playing baseball, is you can't really make a lineup the night before like you can in NBA or NFL, because you really don't know if that person's even going to be in the lineup the next day. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic, and you got to sort of wait till those lineups are put out so you know where your guys are batting and if they're actually going to be in the game at all.
100%. And a reason why I love playing MLB DFS is it's when I play NBA or NFL, and you're with me on this, I'm sure, I feel like I get pressured into playing James Harden, LeBron James. I feel like you need to have that guy in your lineup.
Right.
It's a game theory problem. Everybody will have LeBron or James Harden in their lineup. With MLB, you can fade Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, all those guys, and they may get 0 points, and it's great. And every night, there's usually like one or two guys who are hitting 8th or 9th in the lineup that hit a home run. I've had a couple guys, I'm trying to think, Brad Miller of the Rays last year, several times he had multi-home run games and was hitting like 8th in the lineup. Nobody's taken Brad Miller at 8th in the lineup. I did a couple times, and he double dongs. That's a huge competitive advantage in your lineup when a guy who it'd be like a $4,000 player in NBA putting up 50 points. That's why I like MLB DFS so much, is that there's just so much creativity and strategy involved, and it's so easy to fade the high-priced hitters, and that's why I like it so much.
Yep, I agree 100%. I think last year I hit on a few of those low guys as well, and it's a nice feeling to pay. You're paying minimum salary for a guy, and he hits a home run, knocks in 3. You're like, okay, this guy already paid his salary off in one swing of the bat. So it's a pretty nice feeling. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the first base here. Who are you looking at first base?
For first base, for first base, there's only one play that really sticks out at me. $3,600 for Trey Mancini of the Baltimore Orioles. He had a terrific rookie year last year. Hit 294, had almost 30 home runs. 3,600. I don't know why he's priced so low. He has a good righty-lefty matchup, and he's had some success against the Twins pitcher Jake Odorizzi. $3,600. is a steal for Trey Mancini. I really like him taking on the Twins tomorrow. That's the only. He's going to be in all my lineups. $3,600 is too little for him.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So lock in that player right there, guys. Third base. Who are you looking at for third base?
Third base. A couple guys are going to go in my Milwaukee stack. Hernan Perez. You can play him at third base and outfield. He's very cheap as well. Again, I'm not. They play in a pitcher's park, but it doesn't matter. It's Clayton Richard. Clayton Richard is the opposing pitcher for the Padres. He's probably the worst starting pitcher on opening day that I've seen in quite some time. His career ERA is almost 5. It's like 4.5, something like that. Just not a very good pitcher. He was out of the MLB for a while a couple of years ago, but slowly made his way back. And I love a ton of Brewers tomorrow. Hernan Perez at third base is a good one. A couple others, Maikel Franco of the Phillies. I like a Phillies stack tomorrow against Julio Teheran of the Braves. I think the Phillies, who were the worst team in the majors last year, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. They're going to be really good this year, especially their offense. They have a lot of good hitters. Carlos Santana might be there at third base too. I'd have to reevaluate the first and third, because some of these players, of course, can be played at multiple positions. But
right.
I think you can play Carlos Santana at third, but yeah, let's see. Perez and Santana or Maikel Franco, some nice plays in the National League there at third base.
All right. Going to the shortstop now, just to kind of touch on shortstop a little bit. That's one of the positions that in the strategy that I use, you typically, not typically, but oftentimes you can punt this position at shortstop. But there are a couple high-priced guys here at shortstop. So how do you approach the shortstop position?
That's another one like catcher. I always try and go cheap at catcher, cheap at shortstop, because there's a lot of guys who – actually, I'm sorry. Other way around. Shortstops you really want to pay up for, because shortstop is a position that is defensive-minded. There's so many balls hit at short that you need a good defensive shortstop when making your lineup, and that's what managers think like. So they don't have to be the best hitter in the lineup. They're usually going to be 8th or 9th in the lineup. But I usually go high priced, like a Carlos Correa or a Trey Turner, guys like that, who I know are good power hitters, yet they still play the shortstop position. Those are the guys I look at. I really try and pay up at shortstop, because they are usually, if your shortstop's hitting second or third or first, that's excellent for your lineup, because mostly it's just a defensive-minded position.
Fair enough. I don't know. Usually, I don't know why I would always punt the position last year. I always found that sort of that cheap shortstop that always seemed to do well for me when I punted, because it was a very top-heavy position where you go from guys that are like, 5,000 plus, and then you drop off significantly as you move down the lineup. And I would always find that one shortstop that seemed to fit my lineup pretty well. But if you're saying pay up, then I'll go with your advice on that.
I mean, again, just like NBA sometimes a more balanced lineup of a bunch of guys like Tobias Harris and Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Clarkson. Sometimes a lineup like that will make you a lot of money. Other times it's a bunch of James Harden, LeBron, and then punt every other position. It honestly is just every slate is independent from one another. Sometimes different strategies work, and that's just how it is some nights, So sometimes going cheap at shortstop works out all the time, and sometimes going expensive at short, it works out a lot of the time too.
Fair enough. All right, let's go look at outfield now. Outfield, of course, you've got 3 slots to fill here, so there's probably tons of outfielders you like. Go ahead and give us a couple of them.
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't even list any names for shortstop, Jeff, my bad. Orlando Arcia of the Brewers, playing short. He was excellent for me last year. He got a lot of stolen bases. He isn't a very good hitter for average, but he gets a lot of walks, and he can hit the long ball once in a while. Arcia I really like. Some other guys on the slate. Cesar Hernandez can be played at shortstop too for the Phillies. He's always an on-base machine. I've been playing him for a long time. He always gets on base, gets you a lot of points for your cash game line.
All right.
But to go to transition to outfield, I'm sticking with my Brewers, Phillies stack, and a couple Nationals in there too. Ryan Braun, of course, he'll be in there. Domingo Santana, a couple other Brewers, right-handed matchups against a lefty pitcher. I really like that, even if it is in a pitcher's park. Really like a couple Brewers there. Bryce Harper, he is expensive, but I really, really like the matchup. I feel like he's going to hit a home run on Thursday to, kick off the season right. I think the Nationals are a big World Series contender, and I think Bryce Harper usually comes up in big moments, and opening day is one of the biggest days of the year. So I can see him hitting a home run at $5,100, $5,200, something like that. A couple other guys I like. My must play for the listeners out there, my must play on DK comes in the outfield. Odubel Herrera of the Phillies, $3,500, has to be in your lineup. He will be in all of my lineups. $3,500 for a guy who gets lead off. He always gets on base. He steals a lot of bases. His on-base percentage was incredible last year. He's one of the stars on the Phillies lineup. I don't know why he's $3,500. He's got a plus matchup there against a right-handed pitcher. I don't know why he's $3,500. Same with Trey Mancini of the Orioles. DK didn't do their homework on those two guys. I'm locking in both of them for some reason. They're just so cheap. $3,500 is a steal for Herrera tomorrow in the outfield. Lock him in. All
right, sounds good. Any other thing you want to mention before we close this podcast out?
The one thing I have to say, and it goes with all sports for daily fantasy, is you got to manage your bankroll. Don't go all in one night. Slowly start to build it up with cash games. Don't go 100% GPP. Just bankroll management is so important, and it's literally whether you're a profitable DFS player or you're in the red. That's all that matters. Is I'm usually like 90% cash game, but after that one incident that you mentioned earlier, I have to throw some money in GPP so I don't miss out on $10,000. So just bankroll management is so important. Cash games are I love cash games so much. It's so easy to cash. In GPPs, tournaments, it's only 20% of the field. Sometimes 18, 70% of the field gets paid. The rest go home with nothing.
Yep.
So do not go all GPP one night. Just
you will go broke.
Management is so important. Another big thing, I think, and this is actually kind of a hot take, is that Vegas lines, when it comes to MLB, really, really do not help you. The only real big differences in over-unders, that's where you're looking at, is over-unders and who's projected to win, basically, to make money in DFS. But over-unders for MLB, basically every team has the same over-under, except if it's a Chris Sale playing a Max Scherzer or if it's Coors Field. The over-unders, the Vegas is just trying to get 50% of the money on both sides. They really don't take any hot takes, or they're not going to bump the Cincinnati Reds Nationals game up to 9 or something like that, because then everybody's going to go under, because it's probably going to be like a 4-3 game, something like that. Vegas over under for total runs scored really doesn't tell us much. It really doesn't, and that's where a lot of people get tricked. If they see an over under of 7, that's not that much different from an over under of 6.5 or 6. So.
Right. All right. One thing I wanted to mention real quick is you had kind of talked about bankroll. I like to share my philosophy and how I do my lineups. In baseball, I don't do it quite the same because I don't play much baseball. I don't know a lot about baseball. But in basketball, this is the way I do my lineups. I basically build one cash lineup. I spend most of my research on that lineup. And then depending on how much I like that lineup, I'll enter it in multiple cash games. So I have it in 50-50s. I'll have it in double ups, whatever. And then I kind of figure out what my profit would be if that one cash lineup wins. So let's just, for example, say I put it in a $5 double up. So if I win that double up, my profit is $5. So then I take that $5 and I'll play $4 of that in GPPs. So that way, as long as my double up hits, I'm going to be plus $1. Hopefully, my double up hits and my GPPs also hit, and then I'm having a really good night. And that's kind of how I build it. So that way, as long as you're getting your 50-50s, your double doubles, or your double ups, you're going to be profitable every night. It kind of helped me sort of limit the way that I play because you see that big prize money and you really want to go for that prize money, but the chances of you getting there are slim. You're gonna go broke first. But if you sort of hedge your bets and cover your play with cash games, you're much better off.
Yeah, I just cannot tell you how. Again, that one lineup that I had several years ago that just killed it. Everybody in that lineup just absolutely destroyed it. And of course, that's probably the best lineup I've ever made in any sport. And so that was my one quote unquote $10,000 winner. And I've been playing DFS for 3 or 4 years, and that was my one biggest one. So hitting that, you're not going to hit that jackpot, especially if you don't mass enter contests, for sure.
Definitely. You're going to go broke first. So don't fall in love with that top prize. Just sort of grind it out. It's a daily grind. And there's a reason why they have that rotogrinders.com, the biggest DFS site, because that's what it is. You're grinding it out each day. Just take it at the slow pace. You're not going to win the lottery. Just sort of hedge your bets and play it that way.
Absolutely. MLB DFS, man, it's not for everyone. It can be really frustrating at times when your pitcher just doesn't have it some night and blows up and has 8 runs in the 2 innings that he's pitched. But, for me, it's been very profitable. I grew up playing baseball. I love watching baseball, and so I know a lot about the game, and of course that helps me. Unlike a sport like hockey, who I know nothing about hockey yet. I still dabble in it once in a while, but I don't really know what we're looking for in hockey. But I think just growing up knowing the sport is so helpful. Like, you can't just go in cold turkey not knowing about baseball or basketball or football for any of that.
Definitely. We did have one comment from somebody on Facebook, one of our mutual friends, and actually one of the panel members for our NFL podcast, Tim Strobel. He wanted us to talk a little bit about wind and how wind can affect, whether it's blowing in, blowing out, and how it can affect the Vegas lines and the over/under and all that kind of stuff. So talk a little bit about wind and how that matters for hitters.
That's a great point by Tim, who's also going to be the first ever guest on my podcast coming up here in August. So Tim and I are going to be breaking down all the NFC over/unders, taking guess the line to what we think Vegas thinks the over/under win totals for all 16 NFC NFL teams are going to be. So I'm excited to have Tim on for that. And that's a great point by Tim. Whether the wind is blowing in or blowing out from right center field really helps the hitters, especially in day games. Usually it's not as windy at night, but if you're playing day games, that really affects that the ball travels a lot more if it's blowing in. This is actually like you and righty lefty. I forget which it is, but I'll have to look into it. I forget if the wind is blowing out versus blowing in,
right? Whether
that's good or not. I totally get that mixed up all the time. That's just like you and the righty lefty thing.
Right. I got to research it first.
But
definitely.
Exactly. But it does sometimes take into effect, especially with Wrigley Field. That's just the windiest ballpark in America, and sometimes that really helps the hitters travel. I remember there was a YouTube video a couple years ago of Bryce Harper actually hitting a pop-up in Wrigley Field, and he throws his bat because he thinks it's just going to be an easy fly out, and the ball just got blown all the way into like the second deck of the stands there. And so that it just happens all the time that
yeah, I think there was a football game like that too, a field goal they kicked, and literally it just kind of died about 10 yards short because the wind was blowing right through the football. It was kind of funny.
Yeah, absolutely. The wind definitely affects the ball, and it can definitely affect your lineups for sure when playing in MLB DFS.
All right, man, that wraps up the podcast for tonight. Again, Matt Sandell and I will be on a podcast April 8th, along with Tim Strobel, who did make the comment on Facebook just now about the wind. He'll be one of the members of there as well, doing the live draft, so definitely looking forward to that. Opening day, of course, is Thursday. Everyone get your lineup set. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. Matt, what's your Twitter name again? Is it Return of the Matt still?
Yeah, a little shout out to Matt Morrison, Return of the Matt, except there's no U in the name.
All right. So follow Matt at Return to the Mat. Ask him any questions about MLB DFS, and we'll be talking to you in a couple of weeks, Matt. You have a good night.
You as well, my friend. Take care.